felt like we had put sort of the fall behind us with all of the fire, and we were headed into this now bright future before COVID struck. And it was sort of like.
And now back on the road.
And then
Got to make sure we don't miss what Napa does best.
yeah, I know.
Day drinking. Responsible day drinking. Check this out.
Oh, that's cool. Time to mask up.
We're like fully loaded up and protected. That became like a roadside attraction, like really quickly.
All right, so Tay's trying to drive in 3D.
We just finished a tasting at Tank Garage Winery. It was very cautious, you know, because that winery had been published in the SF Chronicle, and then information changed because, of course, things are changing with COVID. And so they asked me to just not talk to them at all about COVID. So instead, we just ended up with some really oddball, funky, different Napa wines, and that to me was what tasting was all about. So.
Yeah, to me it was like when we basically take liberties at making our own wines in different styles, just to have fun.
That was great. Good Napa experience. Obviously very clean, very protected, and oh wow, here start coming. Here's
forest fires.
You're starting to see some forest fire damage. So.
It's an interesting thing when you work for a family who's been on their same property for over 160 years. All of the adult children that of Robert Young live on the property. Their homes are here. This is, like I said, it's not just a business, it's their whole way of life, right? October, God, was it the 21st? Wednesday. By 4 o'clock in the morning, it had burned to the crest here of this, it had burned over the mycomas to the crest here, and at 4:30, it had whipped down right to that dividing line where the start of the vineyards are. So this would have been probably about a half an hour before the fire, and then the next day, that's that shot. So this is the shot of all of the firemen in the afternoon of the next day, just sort of exhausted on the main, on this sort of historical family home. They said, this is hopeful. It's like a little ray of hope in the middle, in an oasis in disaster port. Although I will say that we felt like we had put sort of the fall behind us with all of the fire, and we were headed into this now bright future before COVID struck. It was sort of like,
dang it, yeah.
If we have an earthquake next year, we're packing it up. but that's also.
For such a huge tourism epicenter, after a few years of big challenges, is 2020 getting back to a normal start after a few months, or how's it feeling for you all?
Well, so we were the epicenter of the Kincaid fire.
Yep.
We
literally
were not
this winery.
Literally, it came down over and we were the first property that got hit by the fire. Mm-hmm. We were open again 2 weeks later.
Wow.
But it was a process of about, I'd say, a couple of months before people started coming back into the area. We were lucky that we had picked almost all of our grapes. We were scheduled to pick the last 10% the day after the fires. But all in all, we were lucky. We counted ourselves lucky. So we sort of felt like we put that behind us, and people were starting to come back. Our business was going gangbusters, going into COVID, and so then, like everybody else, it shuts down. I was telling the team, this is going to last a couple of weeks. Don't worry about it. We'll be right back. Well, so then here we are 3 months later.
And open.
So, but it's not the same. It's different. There's a lot of restrictions. We had to go by appointment only. So before we would take appointments, but then if you were driving by or down the street and they said, you've got to go to Robert Young Estate Winery, you could come in, and if we could accommodate you, we could. So it's all by appointment now. Everything has to be, every group, there's no more than 6 people in a group. Everything has to be socially distanced. You have to wear your mask. As soon as you're seated, you can take it off, but our servers have masks every time, through the whole time that they're serving you. Disinfect everything in between. It's interesting though, because there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that don't interfere with, I think, the experience.
Sure.
And the joy that people have. We've got a small team, and we're really close, and it speaks, I think, to their sense of professionalism, because they were not enthusiastic about opening because they thought that all of these regulations were just going to suck the fun out of the experience was going to be to its detriment, right? And what I was trying to say to them was, trust me, people have been cooped up for months, and they want a little bit of normalcy, right? They want a little bit of joy. And so many people have said, this is I kid you not, this is the highlight of my month, and it's like the first time I feel like a kind of normal again. And so I was telling.
Was that before or after you hit him with the wine? Because that will help too.
Well, I thought it was.
It gets even better after you have the wine. Especially, we all need a little joy back in our lives, you know?
We do.
And so after the first day, the team was like, okay, we totally get it now. And once they understood that people were going to be forgiving and flexible and reasonable and safe on their part too, they're even more enthusiastic now, because they get to reconnect with, we've got very loyal members and a lot of locals.
Are you comfortable with people coming and visiting you from anywhere right now? Are you comfortable with staycationers? Are you comfortable with people traveling around the United States? Or are you comfortable with anybody coming that just is safe, and wears a mask and that sort of thing?
Well, we've set up the protocols on our side to be safe, not just for our customers that come to see us, but also our staff, and we take it really, really seriously. And so I feel like we are not putting people in close quarters with other people. We're protecting our staff, so I'm comfortable with it. I do know that there are some concerns by residents of Healdsburg who are worried that the wine country will act as a draw from people in areas that were still in lockdown, still in home lockdown, coming here and potentially spreading it. And but now very few places are in that kind of situation anymore. And I think that it's up to each business to just sort of protect your staff and your customers in your space.
Does it make sense for Sonoma County to have waited as long as you did to reopen? Does it feel like Sonoma County is disconnected from some of the regulations that are happening in major urban centers that are high risk, like Los Angeles? How does that feel?
As a general manager of a winery, family-owned winery, I'd say that worked hand in hand with Dr. Mays, who's our health official for Sonoma County, and all of the local city councils to try and come up with a plan that was going to protect employees and residents, but understanding that every job's essential. If that's your livelihood, every job is essential. Can you create a space that's safe for people? Then let's try and see how we can get to that point. At a certain point, a lot of small businesses are never coming back. And I think this should be a discussion in the community with a lot of stakeholders at the table, is what is our acceptable level of risk when we encounter not just COVID, but the next thing that will come around, because it's not going to be the last. So what do we think about the rest of the year? So our business is really, really healthy. One of the silver linings is that they actually think this might be a banner year for wine country, because all of the people who would fly out of state or overseas to travel, all of the corporations that had corporate travel and meetings booked, barring another fire event this fall, or I said to you, God help us, an earthquake next year, and who knows what's going to happen in the next couple months. We're actually quite optimistic for the rest of the year. The great thing about working at a winery where the family's been on this property for over 160 years is Robert Young, if he heard us belly aching, he'd be like, I saw World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, my parents saw the Spanish flu. Life was a lot tougher and grittier back then. So it does help us sort of put a sense of proportion and just context on it. And it's not fun by any means, but it's gonna pass. We'll get through it.
Sure.
We're fine.
With a little joy.
With
right?
a little joy in our glass,
Yeah.
exactly.
This has been delightful, of course.
Thank you guys both.
I am anxious for another splash of
Yes.
joy in my cup. But I'd shake your hand or give you a hug, but
Thank you.
we'll be respectful to you and to ourselves and to the state and to everybody else, and not do that for now, but maybe next time.
One of the road signs said shelter in place on it.
Closed, day use only. Okay, so national parks look closed.
Okay, so what do you think for plan B? Well, there's the side of the road option.